It really doesn't matter how smart you are. It does not matter how game-changing that idea is if no one understands you and if no one's paying attention.
Welcome to Mad Influence, a podcast about the power of influence and what happens when people choose to use it for good. I'm Helen Saul, and after a decade in marketing, I've seen how influence can be used for good, bad, and everything in between. In this series, I meet founders, campaigners, and creatives who are choosing to use their platforms to make a meaningful impact, to understand how ideas spread, create connection, and drive change. Today I'm joined by Rebecca Okamoto. Rebecca is a communication and clarity expert whose recent TEDx talk on introducing yourself has been watched over 1.8 million times, reflecting just how common this challenge is. She works with what she refers to as lost Einsteins, people whose thinking is valuable and original, but whose impact gets lost because they struggle to explain the value of what they do in senior or executive settings. Much of her work focuses on helping overlooked or underestimated talent be seen and taken seriously at the table by changing how their ideas are positioned, heard, and perceived. This has led her to develop the 20-word approach, a simple way of introducing yourself or pitching an idea clearly in seconds, not minutes. As Rebecca puts it, what if the only thing between you and being seen, heard, and recognised is your clarity? Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Rebecca.
Thank you, Helen. I'm very excited to be with you today.
Well, I'm very excited to have you here. I think I'm obviously going to have to start by asking if you could introduce yourself.
Well, I really am a communication clarity person, and I help people with something to say, but struggle to say it.
Thank you for that. As I expected, that was very succinct. Why is it important to be so succinct and concise in your introductions?
I think that today, more than ever, what we haven't realized is how tiny attention spans have gotten. In my talk, I referenced a Microsoft study from 2015 where they said, hey, people's attention span is down to 8 seconds. But there are other studies that show it's called thin slicing, where people are making first impressions based off of a single word, based off your intonation and things like that. So it is so hard to capture someone's attention in a day and age where we're distracted, we're multitasking, and everybody seems to be attention deficit.
100%. And what do you think are the best ways that you can grab that attention quickly?
The thing that I really learned over just reading a lot about viral headlines, I do a lot of following of people who do copywriting, is that your introduction has to be not just your introduction, but anytime you're interacting with people on an initial basis, it should be about them, because people pay attention when it's about themselves. So there's all kinds of things that there's all kinds of things that they know. But if you're talking about something they don't know or understand, it's very easy to tune out right away. So it's about telling the person, here's what I can do for you, or I understand your problem.
Yeah. It makes me think about how that works in different environments. And for example, I did do a course on introducing myself, and it's something that I understood a lot in the classroom facilitation of how to do it. But I think when I go into practice of it, and if I'm in a situation like I'm starting a new job soon and people say, introduce yourself, that stuff can sometimes go out of the window, I think. So how do you translate those good ideas that you've just mentioned into practice?
I think part of it is just realizing that we get really nervous when we're introducing ourselves. And if you just start to practice a lot, I practice some of my introductions hundreds of times, depending on who I'm meeting and if I've changed the positioning of it. I give a class on just teaching people how to introduce themselves or how to pitch something. And I show them a screenshot of my phone where I've practiced something 50 times in a 1-week period just by recording myself. So I think that part of it is just doing that. And then the other part is realizing, for me, when I would introduce myself, I always wanted to impress the other person. And it's not about impressing them. It's about getting them to go like, oh, that's a good one. So I just try to tell myself, tell them how you can help them. Like focus on them, not yourself. And it really calms myself down instead of trying to breathlessly recite my resume.
Yeah, definitely. And introductions is obviously one way in, and it's the thing that was talked about on this TEDx talk that was so popular that first led me to you. But I imagine that's just one part of it, right? And a lot of what you talk about and what I've heard you speak about online could apply much wider than those first
Right.
20 seconds, right?
Right. So, well, like for instance, I work with people on how to pitch or even how to give a good answer. So, if someone says, hey, give me an update, how do you grab someone's attention so they can hear it? And then the way you build your influence is to be able to repeat it to other people. So, the same processes that go into a great introduction are the same process to make a great pitch, a great presentation, a great update is grabbing someone's attention, getting them to understand why they should care. So they lean in and say, tell me more.
Yeah. When do you think the first time was that you really started to understand the importance of that, where you realized the importance of clarity?
The first time I realized it really brought home to me the importance of clarity was way back when I was working in corporate and I had a huge opportunity to pitch a game changing program to my senior vice president. So I worked in a little plant in the middle of the desert outside of San Francisco. And I had created a process that reversed the attrition for new managers from 0 to 5 years. So the process worked so great that people were turning down job offers in Silicon Valley to come to our little plant. Just for context, we were making baby diapers. This is not a very sexy field. And yet people really wanted to come to our plant because we built a great reputation of developing people. So when I had the opportunity, my plant manager was like, we need to pitch this. We need to have this go wide across my company, which is Procter and Gamble. I really want to make sure that I impressed my VP. So I just want to make sure he knew all the details and I wanted him to know how passionate I was about it. So I have the opportunity to present. And when I finish, like very pleased with what I had done, he said, my God, I love your enthusiasm. I have no idea what you said. And you can just imagine like I'm just getting red in the face and I don't know what to do. I'm just like hoping that the ground just swallows me up. It's so embarrassing and in front of all my peers. And I really made a mess of it. My plant manager jumped up. She pitched the program for me and it gets approved. It goes across the company. I don't even know how many people we taught this process to. I taught it over in Asia. It was the basis of P&G's first online course. And it's similar to my introduction process, which was the only thing different between success and failure, between his yes and no, was clarity. And that's the first time that I really learned it really doesn't matter how smart you are. It does not matter how game changing that idea is if no one understands you and if no one's paying attention. So that was my first real big, I need to learn how to be clear. It's a game changer. And yet most people don't know it or aren't taught how to be clear.
Do you think that the reason for that is, as in your example, not necessarily knowing how to do it? Or do you think for some people, they believe that actually giving more information and over explaining is useful?
I think it's both. Well, I think it's three things. So no one taught me how to be clear. So I was just following what I thought everyone else was doing. I wanted to make the presentation about myself in terms of really impressing him with how smart I was. So I went deep with the details. And then not particularly in this instance, but in other instances, I've wanted to just think that the details were the whole presentation. So really not adjusting my presentation or my speaking style for my audience. So in some cases, if I was talking to an L&D expert who already knew about the program, going detailed would have been the right thing. A senior vice president who had never heard me speak, who had no idea what my program was, I completely miss the concept of what's the big picture and why should he bother to care? Why listen to me go on and why be interested?
So it's very much about adapting to your audience and thinking who they are, and maybe for someone who has more knowledge, it's okay to pitch it at that level, but for someone that's really new to the topic, you want to be more simple initially. I'm interested in the idea you referenced earlier, and you've talked about it a lot, about how you want the other person to say, tell me more at the end of it. And I'm curious, are you saying that people should hold back something in order to carry on that conversation?
Yes, you should. And the reason why is twofold. One is, especially if it's a cold pitch or someone you don't know or just an introduction, they don't know why you're there. So they have to be able to process what you're talking about. So just overwhelming them, it doesn't serve a purpose because the brain can't actually absorb all that information. It's called the dilution effect, which says the more you say, at least on an initial basis, the more dilute your message becomes. It's not about what you say isn't important. It's about their ability to understand everything that's important is really compromised in the first few moments. But if they hear one thing and they're like, oh, that's really interesting, tell me more. My experience is you end up getting to say everything that you want. It just becomes like a dialogue and it feels really natural to the both of you. And it's really satisfying to hear them go like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, what about this? And what about that? And you're sharing the information because they want to hear it and they're ready or able to be able to digest the information.
Yeah, I think a lot of these principles that you're talking about have parallels with the world that I'm from. I'm from a marketing background, and exactly what we try to do is what you're describing. It's just that we do it with a lot of people, and I think some of these examples are on maybe an individual or a company basis, just directly speaking to people. If you were working with somebody on this type of thing, what do you think are the most common mistakes that people tend to make at the start?
They want to talk about what's important to them, the speaker, not what's important to the listener and their ability to understand. So we want to impress people. We want to show them we're smart. We want to show them that we're prepared. And we want to tell them this is what's important to me without any knowledge of does that person have any context to know that it's important. I learned this when I first started blogging. I took a blogging course and it comes from the book on writing by Stephen King. So he's sold 350, 400 million books worldwide. But what he says he does is he writes for his wife, Tabitha. He writes for one person. And when he writes for her, it just brings to life, will she like this? Will she laugh? Will she think this is ridiculous? Can this help? Will she think this is horrifying or whatever? It really helps clarify. And then I realized when I started blogging and when I was a speaker, that I was a selfish speaker. So I used to think that bloggers would sit down in front of their computer, grab their mug of hot beverage, and then they would sit back and think, all right, what am I going to tell people? What do I want to say to them? So sometimes what I said resonated and sometimes it didn't. When I read that article, I realized writing is for the reader, not the writer. And when you write with the reader in mind, when you speak with the audience in mind, that's when all the magic happens. That's when they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, you're reading my mind. It's changed everything for me. I've been able to go into presentations and I told a friend of mine I was pitching something and I said, you're going to watch when I'm done, the CEO is going to turn to the CFO and say, hire her. Mark my words. Cause I know I grabbed his attention. He was really interested and I made my case. And 10 minutes later, they excused me to talk about it. The CFO walked in and said, yeah, the CEO said, hire you. And I'm like, I know. I know.
Well, that's a great position to be in. How do you get people to shift that mindset if they're not already in this space, if they are the type of person that currently is going into a big presentation and thinking, what are all the things I want to say? What are all the things I want to get across, rather than what are the things this person wants from me?
Well, I'll tell you, I have people that I work with that can just read a blog article, get it instantly, reapply it, and they'll write to me and just say, my business transformed, or I won that presentation, or I got that promotion, or whatever it was that they were doing. So I would say like 15-20% of the people know their audience really well. They know that they need to speak to them. They just don't have the correct format. There's another group of people who understand their audience really well. And I tell them, hey, this is what you're missing. And they're like, oh, I don't have that, but I know how to get that information. So they're almost there, and on their own, they can do it. The trick is, for me, when I work with people, is figuring out where they're at in terms of how much do they understand their audience, and how focused are they on themselves. So they're either going to reject what I say, think that what I say is ridiculous, or have no idea how to do it. And then one group of people, they understand what I'm saying, but they keep second guessing themselves. Yeah, they're so worried. What if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't work? And there's another group of people that really can't absorb what I'm saying. So when I work with people, I always try to assess where are they on that spectrum of their ability to hear me.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing you putting them into those different buckets. And I know that one term that you use to describe all of the people that you work with is the idea of lost
Yeah.
Einsteins. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Um, I saw the term, I think, in a Wall Street Journal article, but it really struck me that it's like these people with these brilliant ideas, and they just can't describe the benefit of it the way their audience can understand the benefit. So in a corporate sense, the strategic benefit, or the commercial benefit, the financial benefit of the idea. So then they have these great ideas, and then people are just like, they're so close, but they're not strategic. Or I want them on my team, running my team, but they're just not quite the person who can sit at the executive table. And it's so frustrating to know you have the game changing idea and sit there and go like, why don't they understand me? And for a lot of my career, I felt that way until people worked with me on how to be clear, and how to crack that code, and how to speak to my audience's attention span. So I love the Lost Einstein, because that's who I am. And the moment they can introduce themselves, the moment that they can pitch that idea, like, everything changes. And they're no
Yeah.
longer lost, and their idea is no longer lost.
Yeah, definitely. You said then that sometimes people can have a bit of a breakthrough. In your example, you said you worked with people that helped you get there. Do you remember any specific moments or advice that people gave you to help you get to that breakthrough?
Yeah. So, like, the example that I gave where I was pitching my big program, I'm in front of my peers. So it's not just me, the VP, and my boss. I happen to be bombing in front of my peers. Right after that meeting, my counterpart, who was in operations, I was in HR at the time, his name is Mitch. He grabbed me and he's like, I want to show you how to be clear. And he said, this is my fault. I should have helped you. I didn't know you were giving this presentation. I should have showed you some techniques that I had learned. So at the time, Procter and Gamble, for marketing, really, really, really invested in clarity. And you would take 2 or 3 day long course, and you would really work on how to be clear. And so the first thing he did was put on a piece of paper, here's how a message flows, and what makes a message both succinct, like on one page, but gets to your point. And I carried that piece of paper around for like 10 years. In fact, I was so worried I was going to lose it. I like copied it to make sure that I could keep a hold of it because he really explained to me the process of message flow. And P&G at
Yeah.
the time was just famous for a one-page memo. And one page isn't writing in 5 font and no margins. It is, can you, in just a few paragraphs and a few sentences, really lay out your idea? Because in order to do that, you really have to have thought through the strategic value to be able to communicate in such a, few number of words.
Yeah. You mentioned there that at the time P&G were really investing in it for marketing purposes, and certainly it's something I've always advocated in the spaces I work in. I think sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to get people on side that are maybe in disciplines where communication or clarity isn't necessarily the first thing that they think about, but potentially they could actually really benefit from it. What's your advice to those type of people?
I work with a lot of technical people, a lot of technical people. I've worked with PhD level and post grad level economists, researchers, MDs. And if I just ask them, do you have a problem where people just don't get it? They're always like, yes. So they actually realize it's important, but you have to convince, call it their leadership, that investing in their clarity is going to turn into a commercial value. And in the case of like marketing, where you're trying to be clear to potentially millions of customers, or in sales, where you need to be clear to sell something, it's a little bit harder until you can show them a lost Einstein idea that took too long to commercialize or that they failed on, and where people, leaders will appreciate the commercial value of clarity.
Yeah, this is just making me think about the idea of clarity, which is important, simplicity, and how sometimes it kind of gets tangled up with a sense of you get people who might criticize the idea of being simple because they think you're somewhat dumbing it down. Do you have any comeback to that sort of take that oversimplifying might make it less intelligent or less expert?
It always depends on your audience, right? So I helped a guy pitch to a very senior level person at a consumer products company in 5 minutes with 3 slides. And he wanted to talk about all these coding features. So it was a SaaS program, like all these things. And I'm like, this guy has no idea what you're talking about. And you're saying something about, we help companies get social. He has no idea what that means. Now, what he does know is he needs to get more consumers. He knows he needs bigger baskets. And so it just depends on your audience. So, yes, the presentation for that president was entirely different than the CTO who was sitting there and trying to evaluate the technical value. The problem is that we tend to use the same introduction or the same presentation regardless of audience. So it's not,
And
in my mind, dumbing anything down. And you can make it more, you have to be able to grab their attention, explain why it matters to them, create a pivot point where they're just like, gee, wait, that's different. Like, tell me more. Then you can become more detailed. Then you can become more technical. So it's just where you introduce the details and what the details that you introduce. It's about what to say, when to say it, and how to present it, not dumbing things down.
yeah, the idea of the pivot point, can you
Yeah.
think of any pivot points that you've made working with people where you've really stopped them in their tracks and made them think?
Yeah. So every time you want to persuade, there has to be a pivot point because you start with, I'm going to talk about what's important to you, but you need them to get to what's important, you, the audience, to me, the speaker. So you have to create some point where they're just like, I, I had no idea. So you want them to go like, that makes sense. Yeah, we've been talking about that. Oh gosh, I never thought about that. And then, wait, why did you say that? tell me more. And how would you fix that? So what you're looking for is your, and this is what demonstrates domain expertise, meaning you know something and then you're dropping in a nugget where they're just like, oh, I didn't think about that. I had no idea it was as bad as it is. That's where you really get to engage them, but you can't get to that point unless you're bringing them along a journey. So
Yeah.
like in my talk about how to introduce yourself, the point I wanted people to get to is it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how brilliant your idea is if no one understands you. So I take them on a journey of, I'm trying to impress people and I have this pitch and I'm very proud of myself. People are like, that's what I would do. And I explain everything and I'm perfect for the job. And the pivot point where they're just like, oh gosh, that's a good point. It doesn't matter how smart you are. Doesn't matter how perfect you are for that job unless someone cares. And that's like the point where people are like, how do you fix that? And then I tell them, well, what I had to do was I went on this journey to do this, and then here's how I fix the problem. So it has a point where you tell them something and you replace their belief. The original belief was, I need to show people how smart I am and I need to impress them with my qualifications. You get them to go like, oh, it's not about the qualifications because they're not paying attention. And then you replace it with a tell me more moment.
Yeah. You obviously referenced your talk there, which, in terms of the actual process of doing it, I imagine it was the ultimate way of putting into action everything that you're about. And you've already mentioned that you prepare an introduction 50 times over. I can only imagine how much that is amplified when you do a TEDx talk. I know that the application process is, very difficult and very stringent. So what was it like prepping for that?
It was incredibly difficult. I just cannot, for me. So it's not, I'm in front of groups all the time. I train all the time and I get a lot of energy by standing in front of a group. So speaking to people or actually even designing the talk wasn't my problem. My problem was I was really blanking out while trying to deliver the talk. And I had put so much pressure on myself knowing that in my mind, if I do a bad job, if I stumble over my words, if I forget something, it felt like career death for me. Not that it would have been. And I was having difficulty. I practiced. I cannot even tell you how many hours and hours I practiced and how many people I practiced in front of. And the 4 times I practiced, like essentially on the stage, on the red dot, all 4 times, I blanked out. Up until 30 minutes before my talk. And I'm like, this is a problem. I don't remember my talk. And what you go through is it's the same process like when you're interviewing and things like that. I could just feel the anxiety rising. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, you can't even remember like the 4th line now of your talk. And it's starting to feel like life and death. And then I just coached myself out of it. And I'm like, okay, stop. You've been in life and death situations. You've been in manufacturing. You've been with fires, very serious injuries, dealt with earthquakes. You've dealt with so many things where it could have been life or death. This is not life or death. This is a severe case of embarrassment, but that's not. And the moment I told myself it really isn't life or death, it just feels that way, everything was fine. And I gave my talk. And then all the other practice and everything else just kicked right in. And I really enjoyed the process.
Yeah. Well, you can tell because obviously came across brilliantly and you didn't see any of those nerves or anxiety that you've just described. You mentioned there how prior to this, you've been in situations which were life or death, being around like really difficult challenges. Is there anything that you take from those experiences that you use in your career today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a really big one is the idea of practice. I've had people try to trick me. I've had people try to like get me to stumble over my introduction by just saying, like holding a microphone under me and just saying, introduce yourself. It has never worked because I practice and I'm prepared for a situation. So I like to envision what's going on for those situations. And that's why I tell people, you would not know it, but I was super timid when I started working, like really, really timid and afraid to speak up. I taught myself how to just get comfortable with uncomfortable situations. And what you might not realize is the more you put yourself out there, the better you get with uncertainty. So
Yeah.
that's why always wanted to do a talk. I just didn't have like the time or the message that I wanted to share. And when I was ready, I put so much stress on it. It was as if I was doing a piano recital when I was 12. So kind of had to like get myself out of that.
Yeah. I imagine that as a result of doing this, and I know actually, because we spoke a bit before recording, that you have had so many people reaching out to you, and it must be about a lot of the topics we've covered today. What do you think are the things that people don't ask you about, or the things that people maybe don't know because they are focused in on the really important topic on the talk, but are there other things that you wish that they would ask about?
I well, I'll say what really strikes me with the number of people reaching out, how many people long to be clear. Like whether it's for their introduction or something broader, that they're not getting the recognition that they think they need for that promotion. What really, really motivates me, who I am as a person, I think why I exist as a person is to help those people who are overlooked, undervalued, ignored, or dismissed find their voice so that they can be seen and heard and recognized. And so, what I wish people knew, first of all, was that this concept of clarity is a skill that they could learn and it applies everywhere. And if you do it in your job interview, you can do it in a meeting, you can do it in front of the board of directors. So, I wish people would ask me more about what is the process to be clear, because it's not like a magical mystical system and it's not only for the few Steve Jobs in the world. It really is for many, many, many people, and they can really transform how they're seen and heard and recognized.
What are some of those tangible differences that someone who is currently maybe dismissed or not being heard can make and see happen in front of them if they are able to work on that process of clarity?
Yeah, I had a guy, I give a lot of credit to his senior vice president. He had a director level person, an IT guy from India. So like there can no classic other like stereotype than, the wordy IT guy. And he was trying to explain to people like, we need to make this change. We need to make this change. We need to make this change. And people are just like, yeah, there goes that wordy IT guy. But his senior vice president thought, this guy is really important. He's just not very clear. And when I helped this person, actually, when I first took him on, I really regretted taking him on as a client because he was so wordy. He just needed to tell everybody everything. But then when he learned to read what his audience needed, he gave a presentation. He told me, he sent to me like 6 months after we finished working, he said, I just got promoted to senior director. It was because of one thing that I did that you taught me. And I presented a project, and in 30 minutes, I got approval for a multi-million dollar IT upgrade that essentially saved the company from all kinds of problems. And people could instantly see he was strategic. He understood strategic value. He just came across as wordy and granular. And the moment he learned how to read his audience, speak to them, they saw him completely differently and he got promoted. So I get people in my classes from a corporate standpoint who will tell me, I got promoted, I got something put through. I mean, it's really rewarding when you see people get recognized for their ideas and all they had to do was present it in a way that someone understood it.
Yeah, I think they're great examples. And it makes me think about people that I've known within my own life. And I would like to know, do you think that there's any link between people who struggle to be clear, people who struggle to get their message across, and self esteem?
Sometimes I mean, I think some people, it's imposter syndrome, so they don't want to speak up. In other cases, it really, like in my case, it literally was an inability to put a cogent message together. Not under like the clarity means, can you create a message that is understandable for someone else? So I was creating a message for myself, but not for the other person. So, but yes, I do think that in some cases it could be a self-esteem issue, or it could have been this was their self-esteem and they kept hearing no and it just chipped away at their self-esteem. Other people are just introverted. English could be a second language, third language, and then or they don't understand the norms. Or a really easy one is like, you're the only one. You're the only technical person on a commercial team. You've just transferred from another division to this division and you're the only one. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people can't be heard, and it definitely will play in your confidence.
And when you're working with people on that process to clarity, do you need to understand those reasons before you can
No,
see them improve? No.
no. That's the beauty of it, which is we just focus on how to read their audience. Like, what is a clear message? What's the construction of it? Why scientifically it works? And then we do all kinds of exercises on how to look like a mind reader, how to really understand where your audience is at and get them to say, tell me more. And when they realize it's just a process, this is the thing is, forget the fact that you're the only one. You're a director level and everyone's a vice president and above. Forget all of that. Just focus on being clear. And for the introverts, I tell them, it doesn't matter that you don't speak up as much as the other person. Your goal is, when you speak up, everybody hears you. So you don't make a misstep when you speak up. And when you speak up, everybody turns and looks at you and says, tell me more. And when someone tries to interrupt you, you're like, one moment, I'm still talking. And you can handle those moments. But what happens is, the moment they understand how to be clear, and that they only need to be clear for that moment, they don't have to dominate the airspace, they really start to improve their confidence. So I do not work with people on their confidence. I don't work with them on, yeah, I'm a Japanese American. I don't work with Asians on why the Asian culture I don't work on that. It works regardless of those things. And it helps them if they're bringing that along with them. It helps them, but it's not a culture class. It's not a confidence class. It's not an introvert class. It is a class on clarity, and it fixes all these other baggage problems that you bring along with you.
Yeah, definitely. You referenced science then. I'm interested in hearing a bit more about that, about the science behind what it is that you are talking about.
Well, so like there's a science of attention span and what people can or can't hear. There is the science of the dilution factor. There is science about how the brain processes information. So that's why I try to show them, here's what science says. So someone might give you a format, but they don't tell you how to slot information in there. And when I teach them, like, understand your audience first, then everything I'm going to teach about where to slot the information makes perfect sense.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I like to ask everybody, because this podcast is called Mad Influence, and so the topic is, of course, influence. Do you think there's a particular moment that you look back on, one that we haven't already talked about today, that you think has really influenced who you are today?
I already discussed kind of like the big moments where I understood things about clarity. But I think it's just the moment that I realized, where you just understand the power of being clear and how it just changes things. So a gentleman came to one of my workshops. This is in 2019, maybe 2018. And he said, I read one of your blogs and here's my business card. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like a fantastic introduction. Like, I don't even know why you're in this class. He said, oh, I read your blog. This is what I came up with and it transformed my business. And when you just see these moments where people are telling you how it changes everything, you realize like it just puts me more on a mission that there are so many people who just long to be clear. And it just reinforces what I'm doing is the right thing. Cause I just get overwhelmed in a good way where people tell me how they got this aha moment. I've had people write to me and tell me in person that when they first time they got introduced themselves, either people clapped, like applauded, or some people even cried telling me what it was like to be felt like they were seen for the first time. And we live in a time now where it, especially in the US, it's very divisive and it it pains me to see this much division, and it just pains me to see that people are struggling to be heard, and we need good ideas. There's lots of constraints going on, there's lots of uncertainty, and some of these people with the fringiest ideas are the most unclear people, and you just want them to be clear to help just flip the equation.
Yeah. You mentioned there about that feeling of being felt heard for the first time and the emotional reaction that people have had once they have experienced that. And we've talked today about a few moments where you didn't feel heard because it was before you had really worked on your clarity. Can you remember the first time that you did feel, wow, I feel really seen, I feel heard, I think I am being really clear?
Yeah, I was at a conference. There was about 400 of us, and the speaker ironically was talking about introducing yourself. She asked us to like write out an introduction and introduce yourself to the person at your table. And I'm in the front. So I finish early and I like text my friend at the next table, like, ha ha ha, I finished. So the speaker, she got visibly mad because she had told us we weren't supposed to be on our phones. So she was like, this person's done. So stand up, introduce yourself. So I stood up and the whole room, it's like 400 people are just like, oh, like, thank goodness it's not me. And I said, my name is Rebecca Okamoto and I'm a communications consultant. And I help people introduce, market, and promote themselves in 20 words or less. And like the whole room just like erupts and starts clapping because everyone expects, they're holding their breath because thinking they could never do it. And the speaker is just like, oh, I guess you know how to do this. And it just really struck me what happens because then people are like now lining up afterwards saying, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? So it just speaks to how important the moment is. You could be like grabbing a coffee, eating ice cream or something and see someone really important. And what are you going to say? Like, what are you going to say the very moment someone's like, hey, what do you do? Are you going to be able to like capture that moment? And I think that so many opportunities, you could be on the elevator and in a corporate setting, your new vice president walks by and comes in. Are you just going to stand there in silence? Or when they say, what are you working on? Are you going to have something really awesome to say where they're like, oh my God, that's really interesting. Tell me more.
I think that's such a great example that you just used there. We are coming sort of towards the end of the recording, so I wanted to check, is there anything that you feel you wanted to talk about today but we haven't covered yet?
I think you said it when you introduced me, and it's important to me. And I tell for people to think, what if? What if it isn't you? What if you just need to be clearer? What if all those times people said no to you had nothing to do with you? It just had to do with how you constructed that message. And what if you're as good as you think you are, smart as you think you are, strategic as you know you are, and you just need to clean up a few things? It will change everything. So I just would always want to challenge your listeners to think about that, which is maybe it's not them and maybe it's not you, maybe it's just a few techniques to be clearer.
Yeah, I think that is a great note to end on. So thank you so much for your time today. I've really appreciated talking to you.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
If people want to find you, where would you like me to send them to?
They can either find me at Rebecca Okamoto at LinkedIn, or my website is 20words.com, the number 20words.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Mad Influence. This is the part of the episode where podcasters tend to ask you to subscribe and most people don't bother, but I would really appreciate it if you could do, because it sends a signal to the platforms to say that the content is good, more people get to see it, and we get to grow the podcast and invite more guests on in the future. So if you could press follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to or watching this podcast, I would really appreciate it.